Hey guys, tonight we drift down a narrow medieval lane, damp with yesterday's rain and smelling faintly of horses, wood smoke, and the questionable decisions of the local tavern. The sun is just a pale coin behind the clouds, and your boots squelch softly on the cobblestones. Somewhere ahead, voices mingle, curious, amused, maybe a little cruel, and you catch sight of something odd. A woman standing very still, her head encased in what looks like an iron bird cage. You probably won't survive this, at least not with your dignity intact. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you are and what time it is there right now. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You edge closer and realize this cage is the infamous brank, or scold's bridle. A device as absurd as it is sinister, forged entirely of iron. It wraps around the head like a grotesque helmet. A flat plate, sometimes studded or spiked, presses against the tongue, ensuring that the wearer's words, if any, come out as muffled groans. This was not, as one might hope, some eccentric milliner's experiment in high fashion. It was a punishment for gossip, nagging, or speaking out of turn. And in a time when most towns were small enough for rumors to do real damage, gossip was taken almost as seriously as theft. The woman's eyes dart side to side, and you can't tell if the dampness on her cheeks is rain or humiliation. People stroll past, pretending to mind their own business, while obviously leaning in to see the glint of the metal and maybe catch a whiff of the iron mingled with breath. You can almost hear the mental note being taken by others. Don't cross the wrong neighbor. Don't annoy the wrong alderman. Mainstream history books will tell you that the brank was most popular in Scotland and parts of northern England during the 16th and 17th centuries. It was a legal punishment, official enough that records were kept and devices were crafted by skilled blacksmiths, each adding their own tiny, sadistic flourishes. Some bridles had bells, so the punished could be heard approaching from a distance. The metallic jingling announcing shame like a medieval ringtone you couldn't mute. But here's the fringe detail historians love to bring up at conferences. In some rare cases, the brank's mouthpiece was coated with foul substances, rotting food, animal waste, just to make the experience memorable. Whether this was officially sanctioned or the handiwork of a particularly vindictive official is still debated. Imagine not only the discomfort of iron, but also the lingering aftertaste that would haunt your dreams. The crowd doesn't jeer loudly. This isn't a festival, just a Tuesday, but the whispers carry. She said the baker's bread was underweight. She called the alderman's wife a goose. It's all absurdly petty. And yet here she stands, her punishment crafted to fit the crime in a way that is both literal and psychological. In the distance, a church bell tolls, as if marking each slow moment of her public display. You glance at the woman's hands. They fidget against her dress, fingers twisting fabric, as though trying to ring out the hours until release. There's a small boy tugging at his mother's sleeve, asking too loudly what's wrong with the lady's head. The mother hushes him, pulling him away. Perhaps she's worried he'll remember this when he's older and think it normal. Historians still argue whether the brank was genuinely effective at curbing gossip or merely turned the punished into local celebrities. After all, nothing spreads faster than a juicy tale, except maybe the story of someone being punished for telling one. If anything, the brank might have made the original rumor juicier, since now everyone would be speculating on what she said that was so terrible. You linger for a moment longer, listening to the uneven rhythm of her breathing under the cage, then step away. The sound of the iron's faint jingle fades into the background as you keep walking. Ahead, a narrow path leads down toward the river, and you catch a flash of wood and rope, something else that promises discomfort. The street smells shift from horses and rain to the sharper tang of river water, and somewhere in the mix, the creak of old timber beckons you forward. The lane narrows until the cobblestones give way to packed dirt, and the air takes on that marshy smell of riverbanks. Mud, algae, and a faint hint of something fermenting that you'd rather not identify. Ahead, a small crowd has gathered along the wooden planks of a dock. You drift closer, and the first thing you notice is the creak of a long wooden beam pivoting on a frame, like a giant seesaw. At one end, there's a rough wooden seat, its planks darkened from years of soaking and drying. At the other end, a heavy counterweight of stone. You've arrived at the ducking stool. It's a simple device, deceptively so. The condemned, usually women accused of being common scolds or suspected of dabbling in witchcraft, will be strapped into the seat, and then the entire contraption would swing forward, plunging them into the water. Sometimes it was a pond, sometimes a river, sometimes, lucky you, a special ducking pool prepared for the occasion. You can almost feel the cold bite of the green, murky water on your skin, the way it would steal the breath from your lungs before you even processed what had happened. The crowd here is more boisterous than the one by the brank. There's laughter, shouting, the occasional cheer. Children stand on tiptoe, eager to see. Somewhere, a fishmonger is selling skewers of grilled eel, because apparently no public punishment is complete without snacks. You hear the voice of a man explaining the rules to a newcomer. They dunk her 3 times, see if she admits her sins. If she floats, she's a witch. If she sinks, well, guess she weren't. He says this with the casualness of someone talking about the weather. Historically, ducking stools were part punishment, part public entertainment, with records of their use dating back to at least the late 15th century in England. The official justification varied. Sometimes it was about punishing disorderly speech, sometimes about testing for witchcraft, and sometimes just a civic spectacle to show the town's moral order being upheld. And yes, there are documented cases in colonial America too, because apparently the idea of dunking people for the crowd's amusement had some transatlantic appeal. The quirky, less talked about fact, in certain towns, the ducking stool was mounted on wheels and could be paraded through the streets before reaching the water. Imagine being strapped into a wooden chair, slowly trundled past every neighbor, ex, and rival in town before the main event. It was humiliation on parade, literally. The woman in the seat today is middle-aged, her hair tied back in a messy bun that's about to become a soggy disaster. She's shouting something, probably her innocence, but the jeers drown her out. The operator, a burly man with forearms like small barrels, pushes the beam down slowly, teasing the crowd, until with one decisive heave the chair swings forward and, splash, she disappears into the green depths. There's a moment of silence. Then she resurfaces, gasping and sputtering, hair plastered to her face. The crowd roars. You notice a few people in the back looking uncomfortable, but no one says anything. The operator hauls the beam back, lets her catch half a breath, then plunges her under again. This time she comes up coughing so hard you can almost feel the ache in your own lungs. Historians still argue whether ducking stools were ever genuinely intended to determine guilt or whether they were always just a symbolic punishment dressed up as justice. After all, being repeatedly submerged in filthy, cold water isn't exactly a scientific method of truth detection. Some accounts claim the real point was to break a person's social standing. Once you've been ducked, everyone would remember it for years. The operator's final dunk is the longest. You can see the ripples spreading out across the surface, the chair trembling in the current. When she's pulled up this time, she hangs limp, exhausted but breathing. The crowd claps, as if they've just witnessed the end of a theater performance. You can almost hear the unspoken, "Well, that's done. Let's get back to our day." As the woman is unstrapped and helped away, dripping and shivering, you step back from the dock. The river laps lazily at the pilings, pretending it had nothing to do with the ordeal. You turn away, walking back toward the heart of town. Somewhere ahead, there's a low wooden platform you spotted earlier, with two sturdy uprights and a crossbeam. From a distance, it looked like a stage. But now you're starting to suspect it's a stage of a very different sort. One where you don't get to leave when the curtain falls. The square opens before you like a living postcard of medieval life. Stalls draped with faded cloth. Hawkers calling out about their onions or salted fish. A blacksmith's hammer ringing in steady rhythm. But in the very center, stealing attention from every other distraction, stands the pillory. It's taller than you expect, the upright posts weathered to a silvery gray, the crossbeam carved with grooves where countless heads and wrists have rested, unwillingly. Right now, a young man is locked into it, his neck and hands protruding through the holes, the wood snug enough to keep him from turning much. His expression is equal parts boredom, resentment, and mild regret. You want her closer, careful to stay out of the splash zone, because here, in the pillory, the punishment isn't just immobilization. It's whatever the public decides to contribute. And the public, you quickly see, is in a generous mood. Rotten vegetables, bits of stale bread, and even the occasional handful of mud arc through the air, hitting with wet thuds. Somewhere in the back, a boy aims with frightening precision. Mainstream accounts will tell you the pillory was used throughout medieval Europe for a range of offenses. Cheating customers, lying under oath, petty theft, breaking trade regulations. It was a public stage for shame, and the duration could range from an hour to an entire day. The goal was to let the community see justice in action while encouraging them to help educate the wrongdoer. But there's a lesser-known twist. In some towns, the offender was allowed or forced to decorate the pillory in a way that made their crime obvious. A baker who sold underweight bread might have tiny loaves hanging from the wood. A drunk might be adorned with wine jugs painted in mocking slogans. Whether this was an official rule or just local flair is something historians still argue over. Either way, it made the punishment a bit more theatrical and a lot more memorable. The young man before you today has a crude sign hanging from the crossbeam. Cheated a widow in rent. That's enough to draw the kind of scorn that cuts deeper than the spoiled cabbage currently sliding down his tunic. A woman with strong arms and a determined frown marches right up to him and tells him, in no uncertain terms, that she hopes his feet develop blisters the size of apples. He blinks slowly, like he's debating whether she's serious. There's no physical escape from the pillory without help, and the discomfort builds in sneaky ways. The shoulders ache, the wrists throb, the neck stiffens. Even without the projectiles, the human body isn't meant to be held like this for hours. And of course, the jeering doesn't help. It's relentless, sometimes petty, sometimes creative. You hear one man mutter a whole improvised poem about the offender's supposed incompetence at basic household chores. You step around to the side and notice how the wood has been polished smooth by years of contact with skin and sweat. The grooves are deep, like faint shadows of all the past occupants who've been through here. People whose names are mostly forgotten, but whose humiliation once filled this same space. And then, as often happens, the novelty wears off. The crowd begins to thin, the vegetable supply dwindles. A group of children runs off toward the smell of roasting chestnuts, leaving only a few stragglers to mutter their last insults. You can see the offender's shoulders sag, partly in relief, partly in exhaustion. Historians still debate whether punishments like the pillory reduced crime or just provided a momentary moral high for the onlookers. There's no shortage of stories about people emerging from it defiant, even proud, their punishment having turned them into minor folk heroes. And that, of course, is the exact opposite of what the law intended. As you turn away from the square, the air feels different, more acrid, warmer. It's not the scent of the markets roasting nuts anymore. It's the sharper tang of burning wood and iron. The smell clings in your nostrils as you follow the side street leading toward the source. Somewhere ahead, a low crackling mixes with a metallic ring of something being hammered into place. You can almost feel the temperature rising, the air heavier with each step. Whatever's next, it won't be as passive as standing in a wooden frame. The alley twists and opens into a courtyard half shaded by overhanging beams. Smoke hangs low here, curling in lazy ribbons before escaping upward into the cold sky. The first thing you notice is the heat, not a cozy fireplace warmth, but the heavy, aggressive kind that makes your skin prickle before you're even close. At the center, a stout wooden chair is fixed to the ground, its legs braced like it's expecting a fight. Near the chair, a brazier glows an angry orange, the coals pulsing with every faint breeze. Beside it, a set of iron restraints gleams faintly in the firelight. And under all of it, under the smell of burning wood, under the tang of metal, there's the sharp, distinct scent of scorched leather. That's when you realize the leather isn't part of the chair. It's the soles of boots someone wore last time they were strapped here. You've stumbled into the realm of foot roasting and fire fetters. One of those punishments so bizarre you almost expect someone to tell you it's an urban legend. But this was very real. In certain medieval courts, especially in parts of France and the Holy Roman Empire, the accused or convicted would be restrained while their bare feet were slowly brought close to a fire. The pain was supposed to encourage confessions, or, in some cases, simply serve as a public warning. A mainstream historical record notes its use in interrogations, especially in witch trials. The victim's ankles would be locked in place while the saws hovered just above glowing embers or hot irons. There was no instant agony, just a slow build, the heat creeping in until the skin blistered. The onlookers got their spectacle, the officials got their statements, and the victim, well, they got a set of memories they'd never walk away from without scars. But here's the strange tidbit. In some regions, the feet were smeared with lard or oil first, allegedly to protect the skin from immediate damage, though the effect was dubious at best. Some say it was just a way to prolong the process, to make the suffering more controlled. Historians still argue whether this was truly meant as mercy or as a twisted form of sadism wrapped in a practical excuse. In front of you now, a man is seated in the chair, his expression fixed somewhere between fear and stubborn defiance. His boots are already off, his pale soles pressed against cool air for the last time. Two assistants, bailiffs, maybe work with calm efficiency, adjusting the restraints. The brazier is dragged forward inch by inch, its heat licking out to meet him. The first contact isn't direct, just warmth, intense enough to make him squirm. The crowd leans forward, some biting their lips, others grinning like this is a game. A young boy whispers something to his father, who ruffles his hair and tells him, "Remember this when you think about stealing bread." The smell changes first, a faint, sweet tang that's not pleasant once you realize what it is. The man flinches hard now, but the restraints hold. His breathing grows ragged, and each twitch of his feet brings them fractionally closer to the embers. The officials are in no rush. They talk amongst themselves, perhaps about the market, perhaps about entirely unrelated gossip. It's part of the cruelty. Letting the victim know they're suffering isn't even the most important thing happening in the moment. One of the assistants picks up a flat iron from the coals and holds it just close enough for the glow to reflect off the man's skin. He jerks instinctively, but there's nowhere to go. The air between iron and flesh wavers with heat. The onlookers murmur. Somewhere, a woman clicks her tongue disapprovingly, not at the punishment, but at the man's lack of composure. Historians still debate whether punishments like this were more about extracting truth or cementing authority. The truth is, confessions under extreme pain are notoriously unreliable. But the image of a man writhing in a chair, feet reddening in the firelight, that would stay in the minds of the townsfolk far longer than a quiet trial ever could. Eventually, the brazier is pulled back. The man's chest heaves, his hair plastered to his temples with sweat. He's released slowly, almost ceremonially, his ankles stiff, his steps faltering as he's led away. The crowd begins to disperse, leaving the courtyard feeling oddly empty, save for the hiss of cooling coals. You step toward the far gate, the air growing cooler with each stride. Beyond it, you hear the creak of wooden wheels and the low murmur of a different kind of gathering, this one moving through the streets. The rhythmic jingle of harness chains tells you there's a cart on the move, and from the sound of the voices, the person it carries isn't riding for comfort. The gate opens onto a narrow lane that smells of damp stone and smoke from a dozen hearths. The sound you picked up earlier resolves into the slow, steady rumble of wooden wheels on uneven cobbles. As you follow it, the sight becomes clear. A small cart, barely more than a flat platform on two large wheels, pulled by a pair of tired-looking horses. But it's not the cart itself that draws the stares. It's the man tied to it. He's upright, his arms roped behind a post, his shirt in tatters. As the cart rolls, a man with an arm like a tree trunk follows alongside, whip in hand. Every dozen paces or so, the whip cracks, sometimes landing across the prisoner's back, sometimes just slicing the air to remind everyone why they're here. You keep pace with the crowd, shadowing the cart, noticing the way townsfolk pop their heads out of upper windows to get a better view. This is whipping at the cart's tail, a punishment older than most of the streets you're walking on. It's been used across Europe for centuries, often for theft, fraud, or other crimes the local court deemed in need of public correction. The offender was paraded through the busiest parts of town, beaten as they went, so everyone could see both the shame and the state's hand in delivering it. The mainstream historical note is that this wasn't just about pain, it was about mobility. Unlike the pillory, which kept the offender in one place, whipping at the cart's tail allowed the punishment to move through every neighborhood, making sure no one missed the spectacle. A moving billboard of human misery. But here's the strange, lesser-known detail. In some places, the rope that bound the prisoner to the cart wasn't tight enough to stop them from stumbling forward. They were forced to chase the cart as it moved, trying to keep up while also bracing for lashes from behind. Historians still argue whether this was meant as extra humiliation or simply the byproduct of an indifferent executioner. The man today doesn't have that problem. He's fixed tight against the post, every jolt of the cart making his head thump against the wood. The whip comes down again, this time with a sharp snap that draws a hiss from those nearest. You notice some people watching intently, while others avert their gaze, the way you might when you see a road accident. You don't want to watch, but you can't quite stop yourself. A woman in the crowd mutters to her companion that the man stole from the church's alms chest. Someone else says he was caught forging tax receipts. No one's entirely sure which story is true, but it hardly matters to the crowd. Truth here is secondary to the spectacle. The whip cracks again, the sound bouncing off the stone walls. You see the prisoner flinch, his shoulders tightening. The executioner, if you can call him that, pauses just long enough to adjust his grip, then delivers another blow. This one draws a faint groan, barely audible over the creak of wheels. Historians still debate whether punishments like this achieve their intended deterrent effect. Some records suggest repeat offenders were common despite public whippings, which raises the question, did the public nature of it actually create a kind of notoriety for certain criminals? In some cases, the condemned became infamous figures, their punishment a twisted badge of identity. The cart turns sharply onto a broader street, passing the market square. Here the crowd is thicker, the smell of bread and roasting meat mixing with the sharp tang of sweat and leather from the whip. A baker pauses mid-sale to watch. A fishmonger leans on his stall, and a group of children trail at the back, giggling without quite knowing why. Eventually, the horse is slow and the whip is lowered. The man on the cart slumps, his face pale, his body trembling with each shallow breath. The ropes are cut, and he's eased down, or rather, allowed to fall, into the waiting grip of two guards. They lead him away while the cart rolls on, empty now, creaking back toward wherever it's kept between uses. You turn to follow another street, this one winding away from the main market. Somewhere ahead you hear an odd, hollow, clunking sound, like something wooden being rolled across stone. Mixed with it is a chorus of laughter and drunken shouting. Less cruel than before, more absurd. Whatever's making that noise, it doesn't sound like it belongs to anything graceful. The hollow clunking grows louder until you catch sight of it. A man wobbling down the lane inside, what looks like the world's most uncomfortable portable home. It takes a moment for your brain to process that this is no festival prop, no medieval street performance. It's a barrel, a full-sized wooden beer barrel, the kind that would normally be lying sideways in a cellar. Only now it's been modified. The top is sawed off, and there are two rough holes hacked in the sides for arms to poke through. This is the drunkard's cloak, a punishment handed out in parts of England, Germany, and the Netherlands for those who couldn't keep their drinking under control, or, more accurately, those who managed to be publicly annoying about it. Instead of a fine or a few hours in the stocks, the offender was shoved into an empty cask and sent waddling through the busiest streets. You're looking at a kind of walking meme from the 1600s. The man's face, red and sweating, pokes out over the rim. His eyes dart to the crowd, which is clearly enjoying the sight far more than he is. As he staggers forward, the bottom edge of the barrel thuds against the cobbles. Every step is awkward. He can't stride normally because the barrel walls bash against his shins. From the inside, It must feel like being stuck in a wooden echo chamber. The mainstream historical fact here is that this wasn't just about public humiliation. It was an attempt at behavioral correction through ridicule. By turning the drunk into a walking advertisement for his own vice, the community hoped to shame him into reform. The theory was simple. No one would want to risk a repeat performance. But here's the quirkier twist. Sometimes these barrels weren't empty. In certain towns, a bit of stale ale or spoiled beer was deliberately sloshed inside, soaking the offender's clothes as they trudged along. The result? Every step came with a double insult of wet boots and a stench that followed them home. Historians still argue whether this was a standard practice or an occasional act of extra malice from creative local officials. The man ahead of you isn't soaked, at least not from beer, but his shirt is clinging to him with sweat. Kids run alongside, tapping on the wood like it's a drum. A few toss small pebbles into the barrel, trying to land them in his boots. Every time he stops to adjust his balance, the crowd laughs. The humiliation is as much about the sound as the sight. The thunk, thunk, thunk of the barrel against the street announces his presence before you even see him. As you trail behind, you imagine what it would feel like to be trapped in there. The smell of old wood and stale drink. The trapped heat. The inability to scratch your face without whacking your elbows on the rim. It's a punishment designed to make you look foolish, yes, but also to physically tire you out. A mile of this, and you'd be exhausted. Historians still debate whether the drunkard's cloak actually reduced drunken misbehavior or if it just gave sober townsfolk an afternoon of entertainment. Records suggest some repeat offenders wore the barrel multiple times, almost like a recurring street character everyone recognized. It's possible that, for certain personalities, the public attention was more intoxicating than the ale itself. Eventually, the man lurches toward the town's edge. A guard steps in, helps lift the barrel off, and give him a shove toward home. The wood is rolled away for the next unlucky soul, while the crowd disperses with the satisfied murmur of people who've just witnessed something they'll be retelling over supper. You continue along the lane, the laughter fading behind you. Ahead, the mood shifts. The street widens into a broad, grassy area, and there's a structure looming at its far end. 3 massive wooden beams forming a triangular frame. The air here carries a different energy, part carnival, part funeral. And judging by the number of people already gathering, whatever's about to happen will draw the whole town. You drift with the current of townsfolk, feeling that strange shift in atmosphere, like the buzz before a concert, except everyone knows the headline act ends with someone dangling by the neck. The towering structure ahead is unmistakable. The Tyburn Gallows, 3 stout beams joined in a triangle, each side long enough to host several nooses. If you're imagining a tidy little stage with 1 rope, you'd be wrong. Tyburn could accommodate multiple executions at once, turning justice into a public event that some treated almost like a grim holiday. By the time you find a place near the front, vendors are already hawking pies and warm ale. Yes, people came to watch hangings and brought snacks. It's the medieval equivalent of grabbing popcorn before Blockbuster. The condemned haven't arrived yet, but the anticipation is as thick as the scent of roasting chestnuts. A mainstream historical fact, Tyburn, located just outside London, was the city's main execution site for centuries, with the first recorded hanging there in 1196. It remained active until 1783, when executions moved to Newgate Prison. For those long centuries, public hangings were meant to serve as moral deterrents, showing the high price of crime in the most visible way possible. But here's a quirkier tidbit. Execution days were so popular that locals would rent out their front rooms for the equivalent of today's VIP balcony seats. If your house had a window with a clear view of the gallows, you could make a small fortune charging eager spectators. Historians still argue whether this commercialization undercut the whole moral lesson angle. It's hard to take a public warning seriously when it's also a ticketed attraction. The rumble of wheels draws your attention. Down the road comes a wagon, the condemned standing in the back with their hands bound, each with a rope already looped loosely around the neck. The crowd presses closer, some jeering, some solemn, others clearly there for the novelty. You hear laughter, you hear prayers, and somewhere a child asks if they can have another meat pie. You can't help imagining the sensory overload from the prisoner's perspective. Your feet unsteady on the moving cart, the smell of sweat and horse manure mingling with hot pastry. Every eye locked on you. In some cases, friends or family would walk alongside, passing up tankards of ale for one last drink, or bits of bread for strength. Sometimes, remarkably, these final refreshments were accepted with a smile. Historians still debate how often hangings actually worked in the way authorities intended. Some accounts describe spectators returning home deeply shaken, vowing never to break the law. Others recall pickpockets weaving through the distracted crowd on execution day, which rather defeats the deterrence argument. The cart reaches the base of the gallows. You watch as the prisoners climb, or are pushed, up the steps. The nooses are adjusted, the knots placed just behind the left ear for a quicker neck break. In theory. But in the 1600s, short drop hangings were more common, often leading to slow strangulation rather than an instant death. A hush falls. The official reads the charges, the crowd shifting on its feet. There's a surreal blend of reverence and casualness. Someone sneezes, someone cheers, someone starts humming a tune. You feel the oddest thing. The sun is warm, the breeze light, and yet the shadow of the gallows feels physically cold. The signal comes. The cart rolls forward, leaving the prisoners suspended. The crowd's collective intake of breath is louder than the creak of the ropes. Within moments, a few hats are removed, and people begin drifting away, chatting as if they'd just watched a sporting match. Others linger, either to make sure the sentence is fully carried out, or simply because they don't have anywhere else to be. As you turn to go, you notice a small group near the rear beam, friends of one of the executed, negotiating for the body. Sometimes families could reclaim their dead for burial. Other times the remains were sent for dissection, adding another chapter to the public spectacle. You move on, the image of those swinging ropes following you down the lane, until the scent of wood smoke pulls your attention toward a smaller, enclosed courtyard. There, a strange, ritualistic trial is being prepared. One where guilt or innocence will be decided not by words, but by fire. You step into the courtyard and feel the heat before you even see the source. At the far end, a brazier glows red, its iron sides trembling with each pulse of wind. A rod rests inside, and you realize this isn't for forging horseshoes. This is for a trial by ordeal. The people here don't just talk about justice. They let the elements decide it. The crowd is smaller than at Tyburn, but more intense. These aren't here for sport. They're here to witness divine judgment. You edge forward, past the smell of scorched ash and the faint tang of hot metal. The accused, a pale figure with her hands bound loosely in front, stands barefoot on the packed dirt. A priest murmurs words you can't quite catch, but the tone is clear. The truth will be revealed by God himself. The mainstream historical fact is that trial by ordeal was practiced in various parts of medieval Europe until it was officially banned by the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215. It was built on the belief that divine intervention would protect the innocent from harm, or at least heal them miraculously afterward. The brazier's heat swells as the priest lifts the iron rod from the coals. Its surface is almost white with intensity. The accused steps forward. The test today is the ordeal of hot iron. They must carry the rod 3 paces barehanded. The idea is simple. After a few days, if the burns are healing cleanly, they're deemed innocent. If not, guilt is declared. Of course, simple hides a lot of wiggle room. Historians still argue whether priests sometimes cooled the rod slightly for those they believed innocent, or overheated it for those they wanted condemned. Here's the quirkier tidbit. Not all ordeals were fiery. In some regions, the ordeal by bread required a suspect to swallow a hunk of dry bread without choking, under the watch of the court. The logic? If you were lying, God would tighten your throat. Not quite Michelin star dining. Back in the courtyard, you watch the accused take the rod. For a moment, there's no sound except the hiss of skin meeting searing iron. Their jaw tightens, but they don't cry out. 1 step, 2, 3. Then the rod is dropped into a bucket of water with a hiss that feels louder than the crowd's collective gasp. The priest wraps the hand in linen, sealing in whatever fate will emerge over the next few days. It strikes you that this is less about immediate spectacle and more about a drawn-out suspense. Justice on a delay. The crowd disperses slowly, whispering predictions of guilt or innocence, as though betting on a sporting match. You linger at the edge, your mind flicking through the punishments you've seen tonight. The iron brank biting into the jaw, the ducking stool's icy plunge, the pillory's slow humiliation, the sting of fire fetters, the cart's lashings, the barrel's swaying shame, Tyburn's swinging ropes, and now, the blistering judgment of a hot iron. The courtyard empties until it's just you, the cooling brazier, and the faint scent of burned metal. Somewhere in the quiet, the medieval belief in divine justice seems both alien and eerily familiar. Different tools, same human hunger for proof, closure, and story. And with that thought, your steps slow, the night air settling soft around you. The pace of your thoughts eases now, like a lantern's glow dimming as the oil runs low. The noise of the crowd fades from your memory until it's nothing more than a soft, distant murmur, replaced by the hush of wind curling through narrow stone alleys. Your breathing matches that rhythm, steady and calm, as the scenes you've witnessed begin to dissolve into harmless fragments. An empty street here, a quiet courtyard there, a rope swaying gently without a body. You let those images drift farther away, replaced by the gentler textures of the present. The faint hum of the fan you turned on earlier, the reassuring weight of the blanket over you, the warmth of your pillow beneath your cheek. Your mind, which just wandered through centuries of strange punishments and superstitions, now finds itself in the safest of all places, your own bed. The air feels softer, time feels slower, and somewhere in the background, as if the old world has given you a courteous bow and stepped aside, the quiet claims the night. You release one last deep breath, heavy with the satisfaction of a long journey completed, and let the darkness carry you the rest of the way into sleep.